Hello friends, and welcome to Sterile Field Guide, a podcast dedicated to medical student general surgical education. I'm Alex, and I'll be your guide. Hey friends, good morning. Today we are talking about studying for Step 2. I thought it would be a good time to take a quick detour from clinical stuff, as I know that it's summertime and a lot of people are thinking about studying for boards. So this episode, I want to talk about Step 2. I need a little bit of time to reflect on Step 1 because it's been more than a year since I took it at this point, and so I want to make sure I'm giving you some accurate information. I just took Step 2 in January, so it's been mostly recent, and I also did a better job documenting what I did. I will warn you, I'm on night shift right now, which is why these episodes have been coming out at random times on Mondays, but also it is morning time and I work at night. So if I sound sleepy, I am so sorry. So for Step 2, I want to just start off by talking about how much time I took to study. So I officially took 4 weeks off of med school to study for Step 2. This is like a built-in month that we have that we can put wherever we want. I finished clerkships in last July, and then I took Step 2 in January. I took Step 1 before Step 2. I made this decision because I felt like I would have more clinical knowledge with more time. Some people, because Step 1 is pass-fail now, decided to take Step 2 directly after clerkships, which is an option, and I can see the appeal of doing that. That is not the choice that I made. That does not mean that it is the wrong choice or the right choice. All that to say, I took Step 1 before Step 2. I took Step 1 in the summer, Step 2 in the winter time, and I officially took 4 weeks off, but I also sort of started to kind of dabble in a couple of UWORLD questions beforehand. So I probably did most of the emergency medicine and family medicine UWORLD questions before my 4 weeks started, but that's not a whole lot of questions. So I would do a couple questions here and there, but nothing too crazy. I took Step 2 in January, so I maybe did a little bit over Christmas, but also wanted to spend time with my family. So I really hit the ground running and spent officially 4 really hard weeks studying for Step 2. For sort of an example of a daily schedule, a lot of people asking me like, how much did I study each day, how many hours? And I didn't necessarily track the hours that I studied, but I more so had a list of things that I wanted to complete in the day. So for example, at the beginning, I sort of based my days around UWorld and getting my Anki done. And so I would do anywhere from like 120 to 200 UWorld questions a day. And then I would unlock cards based on that UWorld, and then I would do my Anki cards, and then it would be evening time. So I would go to the gym and I would make dinner, and I would maybe do some more Anki before bed or waste time on Instagram probably. And then I would go to bed and I would do it all the next day. So I didn't necessarily cut myself off at 5 p.m. every day. If you're a person who likes to have hours instead of tasks, that is absolutely something you can set your limits for. And I feel like just making sure that you have a reasonable amount of time to get the things done that you want to get done is sort of the approach that I would take. So although it sounds really awesome to be like, oh yeah, I only spent 6 hours every day studying, or I spent 8 hours every day studying, that approach doesn't necessarily work for me, but also I have a hard time stopping studying, so maybe that's not the greatest advice. All that to say, I like to have a task list, and I would stop when I got my tasks done for the day. You can choose whatever you want, but that's what I did. So then sort of a breakdown of how the weeks went. So I mentioned already that I would start off, so maybe like the first couple of days, the first maybe 5 days of really hard studying, I would do anywhere from 120 to 200 UWorld questions. And then I would unlock cards based on the questions that I had on UWorld. So to unlock my Anki cards, and then I would do my reviews after I had done the UWorld, which I started off in tutor mode. That takes much longer, obviously, and so really spanning closer to the 120 range instead of the 200, which is a lot easier to do when you're not reviewing every single question in depth. But I felt like doing these reviews really in depth for the first couple of days to really get my bearings again was very helpful for me. And then I took the free 120, which the link can be in the description, so you can find the free 120. You can also Google it. But that was sort of like my diagnostic test. And at this point, I probably had I maybe took this right around Christmas time. I think I had 30 days left, and my goal that I wanted to get to was 30 points above where I was scoring on this free 120, which was at first extremely overwhelming because getting 30 more points on a boards exam seems really scary to do, but I also had 30 days to do it. And so thinking about that as, okay, I need to get 1 point a day, or let's say that you take the practice exam and you have 10 days left and you need 20 more points, that's only 2 points a day. That's doable. That's something that you reasonably can achieve. And so I think thinking about it in terms of what do I need to achieve today is the best way to maintain your sanity, because it is such a huge test and it feels really scary. And if you think about it in terms of okay, how am I going to do on this exam that totally defines my career, that can just send you off the rails and make you not productive. So I would recommend setting realistic goals for each day. My approach was setting a points goal, and there's no objective way to measure this, but it would more so be okay, after the first couple of days, I started to notice, okay, I'm maybe not so good at this topic, and then I would add in a Boards and Beyond video and really try to master something that I wasn't good at. So sort of patching holes in my knowledge to collect points is sort of how I thought about it. So I would really hammer down some endocrinology stuff, which I typically struggle with. I would really, really spend some time on some endocrine. I would do a bunch of endocrine UWorld questions, and I would try to be I am solid on some things that I wasn't before. Or, okay, I keep missing these questions about this specific topic. Let me do practice tests. Let me do some more Boards and Beyond. Let me really study this Anki. And then let me be better at it at the end of the day. And that would be my checking my box of okay, I achieved my point for the day. So that sort of started happening at the end of the first week. And I kind of kept that up as I went on throughout the rest of the month. I definitely, as I mentioned, I unlock Anki cards based on the UWorld questions that I did. Some people, I use the Anking deck. Most of you who are listening to this are probably familiar with that. You can find it on Reddit. You just search the Anking deck. But essentially, there are thousands upon thousands upon thousands of cards, and it's not possible, I don't think, it's not possible for me, at least, to do all of those cards. And so what I found to be more helpful was unlocking cards based on questions that I'd seen. So it'd be topics that I'm actively reviewing so that I can master them as they come, versus some people like to unlock all of them and just get through what they can get through. All that to say, I am a chronic over unlocker. So I will unlock so many Anki cards, and even on things that I feel really confident on, I'll unlock a card, which is great for review at first, but then when you are studying for a boards exam that covers every topic you've ever learned, it gets a little overwhelming and hard to keep up. So I did not finish my Anki cards every single day, and at one point I think I totally gave up on Anki, so I use it as a supplement, but it wasn't the main thing that I did, although I do think it would be helpful. And I think if you can approach it in a way that is bite-sized and attainable and not unlocking thousands of cards, probably would be a great tool to use. So all that to say, here is a sample of what my schedule would look like during the month that I was not attending classes and I had my time off to study. So I would get up when I felt like it, which was probably 8 or 9 in the morning, sometimes earlier, but it was winter time, so the sun wasn't out and I wasn't trying to be awake and miserable. Wintertime is just really hard for me personally, and probably a lot of you as well. And so I was trying to make this a peaceful month. So got up when I felt like it, would make my little breakfast, and then I would either start on Anki or start some UWorld while I ate. It was my goal to get a whole lot of UWorld done before lunchtime because that felt like the most time consuming thing for me. I started off, like I mentioned, doing UWorld in tutor mode, and so that takes a really, really long time. And so if I could, on tutor mode, I'd try to get 80 or 120 done before lunchtime. I know a block timed takes 1 hour, and so having 4 hours to do 2 or 3 blocks tutored is like asking sometimes. I would try to get that stuff done before lunchtime. I would take a little study break for lunch for a little while and then come back to studying. I wouldn't ever take like hours and hours off after my lunchtime, but I would probably give myself like an hour or so. Nothing stringent. That's just sort of how it shook out every day. And then I would finish my UWorld, my projected UWorld for the day, do my Anki, and then I was pretty consistent about going to the gym, making dinner, doing those sorts of things. I had some good balance. I was studying most of the day, but did take care of myself. And then I would go to bed and I would do it the next day. When I added in Boards and Beyond, which I'll talk about resources that I use here in a second, but when I started adding Boards and Beyond videos, I would actually start my day with those. So I would push my UWorld until after my Boards and Beyond, because I use the Boards and Beyond as my like points collector thing. So I would be like, okay, awesome. I am going to master these cardiology concepts. I'm going to watch these videos and take some notes on them. And then I'm going to do a bunch of cardiology questions for practice to really drill this stuff down. And so that's the reason why I did my Boards and Beyond. And then I did my UWorld. And then I did my reviews for Anki while I was still doing that. At one point I did totally give up Anki, as I mentioned. But most days would be able to go to the gym, eat a good meal, like have a little bit of time to myself. So speaking about the resources that I use, I've mentioned all of them so far. I used UWorld, I use Anki, specifically the Anking deck. I use Boards and Beyond, and then I use Sketchy for micro and pharmacology. Speaking specifically about UWorld, this is a question that I asked a lot of people just to make sure that I was sort of scoring in the projected range as I started studying, how I was scoring on like sets of 40 at the beginning. I would say probably at first I was scoring like 50 to 60%, although I think that it's probably okay if you're scoring less than that at the beginning. After I sort of got my bearings, started really hammering down on some Anki and my Boards and Beyond, I would aim for like 70% on all of the sets. Obviously, you're not necessarily in control, but that was sort of my gauge of like the progress I was making. And I would aim for like 70s all week, and then I would aim for 80s the next week, and then hoping for some 90s in the last week. And sometimes that happens and sometimes it didn't, but it was a good way to sort of track my progress. And if I was consistently not hitting my goals, it was like, okay, what do I need to do differently? What am I missing? And that was some way for me to sort of keep track of how I was progressing. All that to say, I do want to like normalize when you first start UWorld. It's very, very easy to put your worth and like the whole vibe of your day is really tied in how you're doing on your UWorld. And this applied to me as well. I'm giving you this advice. Like, I'm so wise, but like when I was getting the 50s and 60% on my UWorld sets, I was not happy about it. And I think that it's totally normal. And when I was studying for step 1, I was scoring even less on my UWorld sets. And all that to say, I did fine on both of them. So where you're starting on your UWorld does not define you. And as long as you can keep a good attitude, keep a good energy about yourself, and learn instead of putting your worth and basing your success in how you're doing on these practice tests, I think that's going to be the most beneficial for you. So anyway, just normalizing, because full circle, just normalizing that it is okay to not score amazing right away on UWorld. How much UWorld did I complete? I did not finish all of UWorld, much to my dismay. Obviously, it would have been really nice to finish all of it, but simply did not have enough time. I probably did like 80 to 90% of the total question bank, although I don't quite remember and I don't have access to that account anymore, but I think somewhere around 80 to 90%. I definitely didn't finish, but I did do more than 75% of the questions. It was a grind. I did a lot of questions, but that was what was helpful for me. I do know people who did a lot less than that, who scored better than me on step 2, who just are like incredibly smart and didn't need as much review. I maybe don't fall into that category. So I like to do all the questions, get as much practice as I can, and do my best. So maybe that applies to you, maybe it doesn't, but that's what I did. And then how I used the UWorld, As I mentioned, at first I had it in tutor mode, probably for like a week and a half or so. And then I switched to untimed, untutored, and just blasted through what I could in the mornings, which was a lot more efficient than doing the untimed tutored mode. And then I would sometimes do the timed untutor mode for practicing with my timing, but I didn't really like the pressure of doing that, especially since I was already doing practice tests and timing fine on them. I didn't find it to be super useful for me to do the timed ones unless I was extremely unmotivated and I knew that I needed to get more questions done, and then I could just start the timer and be like, okay, I guess I need to like get through this. So I used that as a tool for motivation when I didn't have any, but I don't think that I pushed myself in ways that were super uncomfortable, because the whole month itself is just like not fun, right? And so I didn't want to give myself too much suffering if it was going to be of little benefit to me. If that's useful for you, do it that way. If not, if you feel like having the timer on is helpful, also totally valid. I mentioned Anki already, the Anking deck. I mentioned Boards and Beyond. I used a lot of those videos. And then again, I used Sketchy for microbiology and pharmacology. I did not finish all of Sketchy. I've seen some of it before. I didn't use it a whole lot first year. I didn't really use it at all second year. So I used it a little bit for just remembering bugs and some drugs. And I think it was like kind of useful. I can't remember specifically any questions from the exam. I blacked all of that out, luckily, but I think it is useful to review, and especially if you're struggling with the immunology or microbiology sections on UWORLD or your practice tests, it would definitely be good to review those things. Speaking about how many practice exams I didn't do as much as some people did. So I did the free 120, the UWorld Sim 1 and Sim 2. I did 2 NBMEs. Specifically, I did NBME 7 and then part of another NBME practice test. But I do not recommend that you do NBME 7, because after I completed it and scored it, I was like, wow, this is a horrible score. It was way, way worse. I had already at this point done the free 120, the UWorld Sim 1, Sim 2, and I had been steadily improving, and I'm like, okay, I'm getting my point per day. I'm moving in the right direction. I do the NBME 7, and I get like 20 points lower than my free 120. And I'm like, oh Lord, this is not going to be great. And then I'm reading about it online, and it just seems like it grossly underestimates your score. And although it was good practice, I do think doing the questions was good for me. It's not a confidence booster, especially when you feel like a lot is riding on this exam. I don't know that the questions of NBME 7 were any more helpful than another NBME that would be more reflective of your score would be. So grain of salt with that. Do as many questions as you want to, but NBME 7 scoring, probably not the most useful to you. So those are all of the practice tests I did. A lot of people did more than that. That just like wasn't part of my plan, and that's okay. Finally, just wrapping this up with some tips for sanity. I think finding a balance that works for you, whether that be hours per day or tasks per day. I do think taking breaks and having fun things to look forward to are helpful in getting through this, especially if you're doing it in the dead of winter, or even if you're doing it in the summertime when the weather's nice and your friends are all out having fun and you're sitting inside doing your Anki again. It's good to have fun things to look forward to. It's good for your brain to have leisure time. This has been scientifically proven. So take some breaks, take care of yourself. Those are the basic things you know about that. And then I already mentioned this, but I cannot stress this enough. This is a big test. It feels really big because it is. It's really scary because it is. And it's important. And it in some ways can define your career. And so it is important to take it seriously. And it also is important for you to maintain your mental well-being during this time. And so the thing that worked for me and what I tell other people, so my pearl for this episode is you should break down your giant goal into something that you can achieve every single day. This applies to every goal ever, but specifically for the STEP exams, what I mentioned earlier is like if you have a goal in mind, if you're applying to a super competitive specialty and you absolutely need to get this score, and your first and second practice tests are showing you are not there yet, and you're like, okay, I only have 3 more weeks. How am I ever going to do that? Get your points. Figure out how many points you need to get a day and figure out what you're not doing well in, and just get good at something every day. If you can identify something to improve in every single day, you're gonna gain points and you're gonna get better. And if you just do some reflecting, recognize patterns of what you're not doing well in, and chunk that big goal, break it up into smaller pieces, because you will never be able to focus or feel well about what's going on if you are so distracted by like the anxiety of trying to be successful in this test that feels so big and scary. Other than that, test day, it's a long test. Bring some snacks. I was exhausted by the end of this one. It felt way longer than step 1. I think it's only 1 hour longer, but it felt miserably long. So just prepare yourself. Make sure that you have some stamina. Make sure that you're working hard during your prep time so that you can endure a 9-hour exam, because it gets long. It gets really, really long. But you'll make it through. You'll pass the time waiting for your score, and hopefully you're very happy with how you do. I wish you the best of luck. Please reach out if you have specific questions. Happy to help on my end any way that I can, and I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye. That's it for today's podcast. You can support this podcast and receive exclusive educational content on Patreon, and find us on Instagram at Sterile Field Guide. Questions and requests can be submitted to our Gmail at sterilefieldguide@gmail.com. Thank you for listening, and until next time, may your retraction be superb and your suture tails be the perfect length.